very happy that you took the time today, Robert, being on
Yeah,
my podcast. And yes, so the Mr. Infamous Robert Scoble, is that
I
how I
wore the
pronounce your
right
name?
T-shirt though for this, right?
Nice.
I
I
got an
appreciate it.
Optimus T-shirt. I didn't even plan
Oh,
that out.
competitor.
So,
I need to think about that. Maybe
robots.
doing some editing afterwards. Yeah, thanks for being here today. And maybe for those who dare not to know you, maybe you can give us a little intro.
Yeah, I was Apple's first child laborer back in 1978 and built Apple II motherboards in my mom's kitchen with my mom. And that's a long story. Um, and that led to a career of studying new things. I've interviewed many people, visited many R&D labs. I would became a strategist at Microsoft in 2003 through six, right? And then I worked at Fast Company, then I worked at Rackspace. But all of those times, I was a media guy. I had a famous blog in Silicon Valley covering innovation, and so I've had a pretty crazy life. Even last night, I was at Jeremiah's AI event, Llama Lounge, in San Francisco, and I was talking to a guy who worked at the Park Research Center back when Steve Jobs came in there and stole them. No, didn't really steal it, but got the team for the original Macintosh out of that, right? So it's crazy,
You,
crazy.
you, you started with a very interesting introduction, and you said it's a crazy story. Maybe we can start with the story if you don't mind telling it. And
Yeah,
you've told it maybe a million times already, but I would like to be a million and one
yeah.
if you would be
Well,
so kind.
Um, A- Apple ran out of factory capability because the Apple II was selling really well back in the early days and more than they could make. And so they hired a woman, Hildy Licht, who still runs contract manufacturing here in Silicon Valley. And she had a series of housewives that she would get a job and then have the housewives make the product. And so my mom was one of those housewives because we grew up in Cupertino, California. And yeah, she had a whole system for building motherboards, and the kids would stuff them, and I'd get paid $1 to put all the components in them, and then my mom would solder them. Later, she taught me to solder on the motherboards, which turned into a job at HP. I worked at a manufacturing line there, so
Which year are we
building.
talking about?
What's that?
Which year are we talking about?
78, 1978, right in the beginning. Yeah, of personal computing. Yeah. So, and that led to a whole, I mean, Siri was launched in my on my show in my house. I was like the 79th user of Instagram. I had the first ride in the first Mercedes-Benz autonomous car. I had the first ride in the first Tesla ever. Um, yeah, stuff like that. Other than Elon, as Elon was giving me a ride.
Too good.
It's crazy, man. He gave me a ride in the first one before he gave his best friend a ride
I
because we were
mean,
racing his friend.
mm, and so if you don't mind going back to 78, you said that so this is you in your parents' house and your mother
Yeah.
is doing this kind of work. And you said this led to your first HP
Yeah,
work.
working on the manufacturing line, I ran a wave solder machine because I knew how to solder. So, qualified to run a wave solder machine. This wave solder. So my mom would solder a motherboard, right, which is something like this, with hundreds of components or 100 components. I don't know how many components, but a bunch of components. It took her about half an hour to solder it. Um, the same kind of motherboard in the wave solder machine got soldered in 20 seconds, right? So I was like, oh, that's more productive.
So this qualified you for this kind of job. And was there any how long did you have this kind of job?
Just a few months. It was an early job, I was going to high school. So, but yeah, it
Mm.
taught me a few things and it got me to love manufacturing. I love living, visiting factories and meeting people who make things. So
I mean, it's funny that you're saying this because nowadays we have a lot of AI. I mean, AI is a hot topic for a few years now, and you
yeah.
see young startup founders, mostly computer science guys or in robotics. But academia is totally different from the industry, right? And
Oh
manufacturing, and
yeah.
you see still making kids, or not kids, but founders making the same mistakes over and over again. So
Yeah.
building a product and being very far away from the manufacturing side. And even in my former company, we took the product people and people who were working on the machine learning algorithms for the AI guided software, and went to an automotive company, and
Yeah.
being on the factory side, and people are like surprised how it is, and being so what is your experience here? How is that, because you're very much
Yeah.
involved in these kind of startup, in this kind of startup world, right? How do you see this big gap between people who have so much knowledge in this deep tech area, but then there's such a big gap of non-existing knowledge
It,
about
it's the
manufacturing?
traditional fight in Silicon Valley that the marketing team never got along well with the engineering team, right?
Mm.
And, and this is they should, right? Because if engineers could use marketers and understand what they do, then all of a sudden your product gets customers, right? But and the marketers should understand the engineers. Like, don't be promising shit that you can't build. Like an engineer is going to get pissed about, doing. So, but it's a funny tug of war between these two factions, and it's still continuing today. And you're right. There's not a lot of people doing marketing really well. Explaining their company, explaining their product. I'm literally watching a lot of companies, 5,400 companies on X.com who are building AI stuff. So I see the patterns. They're not that brilliant at it. And so when somebody like Elon Musk comes along, he catches your attention because he's really good at it, at least at some level of getting people to try to know about his products, right, and care about them.
I mean, there's an argument. Yeah, there's the argument that he was actually the one who came up with the hype about humanoid robots that we have today, right? If you were talk
Yeah.
to any automotive company like 5 years ago, they would say, "Yeah, I don't need a humanoid in the in the factory, right? There's no reason
Well,
to have a humanoid, right?" And nowadays, I think it seems like
we
every
have
single
lots of
day.
stories. Remember, I had the first ride in the Mercedes Benz, so I got to know the engineers pretty well over at Mercedes Benz, right? Who are building the autonomous car. It's really weird. I mean, growing up here in the Valley, there was no car industry here, right? All the car industry was in Munich or Detroit or Tokyo or somewhere else, right? And then slowly all the auto industry started hiring and started coming here to Silicon Valley to hire technology engineers because the car business started changing, right? To more and more and more of a technology play. I mean, the Consumer Electronics Show now has a huge car exhibit, right? And that didn't wasn't true 30 years ago, right? So yeah, it's weird, that literally every car manufacturer now has their R&D here, right? Uh, 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 Honda, Mercedes, VW, General Motors,
Uh,
Neo, even China, right? They have a lot of their R&D here, right? Even if a Chinese company, right?
so the company I'm working for is Neuro Robotics, and our CTO is Jens. He
Yeah,
was working for Bosch for over 20 years, and
yeah,
he was building manufacturing factories, chip factories, right? And so
yeah,
there's this Bosch had so many different kind of sensors in the cars, and like many years ago, there was the discussion: should they reduce the amount of sensors in or chips in the car, right?
yeah,
And they were saying, no, this is the way we do business. And NVIDIA came up with the idea to just do just a few, like five, six, seven, instead of, I don't know, 50, 60, 70, or maybe even more. And yeah, I mean, we can see who succeeded here. And it's very funny. Yesterday, I had I'm not a car driver per se because I used to live in Berlin. There's no reason for having a car, at least in my
yeah,
opinion. So yesterday I was driving for a few hours, and it's a German car I was driving with, and the navigation system was just like bad. I was asking myself, like, did ever anybody get in the car and then just let your
yeah,
mother, who's 50, 60, 70, drive a car and using that navigation system and see
yeah,
if she will be able to find the destination? So it seems like nowadays you just enter the car and you're using your phone, and the phone connects with the car, and then you drive through the software on the phone. And I think there's a big
Yeah.
miss from big car companies, or from German car companies at least.
It's worse than
Um,
this. It's way worse than this. You're gonna be shocked, because I gave a speech to the engineers at Mercedes Benz, right, in Sunnyvale, and um I this was right after the first Tesla came out, right? The first Model S. Started Tesla started being a real company. And I was like, well, when are you going to put a touchscreen in your car? Because back then Mercedes had a knob between the seats that controlled the computer in the dash. And their answer was, well, we wanted to do it, but our executives back in Germany don't want fingerprints on the glass. And so they keep killing projects, right? They don't ship new technology. They don't want touchscreen screens, and they don't want to pay a couple cents extra for the touchscreen, right? The car industry is all about reducing costs to getting every penny of cost out of the car that you can, right? And it's really hard to get executives to spend more money. It gets worse. I ask them, when are you going to put a computer that always is uploading and downloading, upgrading? And because Tesla already had it. We're scared of getting hacked. Our executives told us we can't ship that, right? Because we're a multinational company. And man, if we got hacked, it would destroy us so much brand, so much sales, right? It caused so many problems, right? Well, hasn't been hacked, really, and they figured out how to write good, secure software, right? And Mercedes couldn't do that because they didn't want to invest in it.
I think this is the major point here, to being too scared of doing this kind of
It
investment.
it's it's fear of change. People don't like to change, right? Here's one. I asked them, when are you going to put electric motors in the dash for the vents, to so I could control the vents on my phone like I can on a Tesla, right? Oh, our customers want to push buttons. They want a vent with a button, so you can physically move it. You don't have to use a computer screen. And this is true. The auto industry forced me to go around America and start doing customer research and asking people about buttons. It's like you go to Kansas and meet some farmers. They're like, all right, people, how about if I sell you a truck with a computer in it, right? And no buttons. What do you think of that? And people would start, one guy told me, I'm a farmer. I have a flip phone. I don't like computers. I don't like touching computers. I don't like using them. I think you guys in Silicon Valley are weird. I don't want to use button. I don't want to touch a computer screen. I want to have a button for my radio. Right? And
I
people
mean,
can't change that fact, right? So this is why Steve Jobs and others say don't do customer research, because the customer will tell you the wrong thing. They won't tell you
interesting take.
about
Interesting take.
what they're going to buy in right. Henry Ford said if you ask people back in the day when everybody had a horse what they wanted a better horse, right? They didn't know they wanted a noisy contraption to drive them around, right?
Yeah, I heard that. I heard the same sentence today regarding the quote from Henry Ford, and yeah, you're absolutely right. The change management that needs to be taken care of. I mean, this AI robotic niche we are in. Oh, yeah, I'm seeing so many
It's really hard. I
founders.
mean, you go to Detroit and you visit, or anywhere, and visit a factory and see how they make things. The F-150 Ford is made on a long snaking line in a big, huge building with a lot of things going on, right? So how do you change that? Yeah, uh, Tesla says we're not going to do it that way. We're going to buy a casting machine and cast half the car, right? Molten aluminum. They don't do that kind of thing in Mercedes Benz
I mean, there is a bit you do need to
or
admit.
Ford.
Yesterday, when I was driving with a colleague, and he said that he owns a Tesla. Not owns. I think he rented a Tesla, and he said it's about to expire this rental agreement, and he says
Yeah,
there is a difference in driving a Tesla and driving a German motor car.
yeah.
There is. if you drive over 120 kilometer per hour, you feel that there is a quality difference in the manufacturing side. So it's much
Yeah.
quieter. It's there is so much knowledge in building cars for 100 years. This is definitely right. But you are totally right. We are so
But
used to.
I had the German auto industry, a bunch of journalists in my house because I offered to, they were here in Silicon Valley and they were like, we need a place to watch WWDC. Come on over. Well, and then we started talking about the auto industry. These are people who try every single auto, and they're in Germany, right? They're very pro-German. They want Mercedes-Benz or BMW or Porsche to do or Audi to do well. All right, they're invested. They like the German auto industry because it has that history. You can take it on the Autobahn and do 200 miles an hour or a lot of kilometers in a Porsche, right? That's fine. But they all own a Teslas. They say Tesla is just eviscerating the German auto industry. It's
And
the
I think here
AI is way better. The electronics is way better. The In a Cybertruck, you're driving by wire now. You can't do that in a German car. There's
so I
no
think here
innovation.
it's all
There's not
about
the same
the.
innovation.
I think it's all about the usability. So people
Yeah,
are so used to having apps, right? And everything is so well thought through, or the
yeah,
majority of them. So it does make sense the way it is displayed. So the user experience, the user interface is everything is very smooth. And I think
yeah,
here the change that is happening so slow. So when I was using yesterday the car and the navigation system, I was like, so this is the best you can come up with. So
yeah,
and see, I think here the better software is much more visible versus
yeah,
all the mechanical parts that are within the car that you don't see.
yeah.
And I think this could be the main reason why people say I would like, because yeah, I would like to have a
No, this is
Tesla.
why Tesla just announced they made more cars in China than any other week, basically. They just had a record week. They're making a lot of cars. The Chinese market is going for technology, right? And not just Tesla. You look at the Chinese auto industry, they're doing autonomy. They're doing all the same stuff Tesla's doing, right? And so this is why Tesla still matters in China. And American auto industry is being eviscerated in China right now because they don't have anything to compete with a Neo or with Xiaomi, right? Who makes cars without any humans in their manufacturing plant. Imagine I go to Germany and go, hey, we need to fire all the workers, right? We need to convert to a completely automated factory. We need to build a completely automated factory. The laws keep you from doing that in Germany. They can't do that. It, and the unions can't keep them from doing that. You can't do that. Not easily and not quickly, right? You might be able to do it over 15 years, but you can't turn around and say, oh, we're going to build a huge new fully automated factory tomorrow. But Xiaomi already has one in China, and that's
I
who
mean,
you're
there's
competing with.
yeah, I mean, there's a different advantage, or there's different points to this, right? So if you say, because we, as a European, I think there's this as we have this kind of history with unions and labor
Yeah,
laws so strongly, it is nice to be working in this kind of industries for 20, 30, 40 years, being able to pay down your house and your cars and having a good life that makes 60, 70K per year, right? And
or
it's almost
more.
impossible to get fired. So it does give you a different kind of life versus you can fire it. It doesn't matter how long you work for the company for within 2 weeks in the US, right? So there is a
Yeah.
different kind of culture. And the question is, do we want to get rid of that from an automation, robotics, AI point of view? Sure, because in the long run, they make less mistakes. They run much more reliable,
You don't
and
have to
this
worry
is
if your car's made on a Monday or a Friday, right? Because your workers are getting drunk on a Friday
correct.
and you're looking forward to the weekend. They made a little mistake. Oh well,
Mm.
But even worse, it's consistency of quality and it's cost, right? Eventually, right? If you have a robot factory that everything's being made by robots, your costs are lower over time and your consistency is better. Your quality level gets better, right? Because like you said, I visited a factory in China that makes a whole bunch of hard drives a week, 1.1 million hard drives, and the last part it has all women, no men on it, and right there, the packaging part. I asked the guy who runs the factory, and of course it's a guy, why don't you hire men on the factory line? And he's like, oh, men drop hard drive on floor and put it back online. Women drive hard drive on floor, come and bring it to me. In other words, uh, it's just a different world in manufacturing over there, right? They have a different set of rules, different way of looking at it. I asked VW, talk about German manufacturers, when are you going to put a 3D sensor on your factory floor? They already have a 3D digital twin of the whole factory floor to do training. You can train some jobs in VR before you get on the factory line and learn how to do a new job in VR before, right before you figure out how to run a machine out on the factory floor or something like that. And so, when are you going to put a 3D sensor on the work or doing the work? And so you can, your computer, your AI can see new patterns, can say, oh, you should reorganize the factory this way, or you should, lay out his tools different or her tools different, or right. You can't do it in Germany. Yeah. Rules against
Privacy
recording.
reasons, you
Yeah,
cannot
yeah.
film
But in
somebody.
China, they're doing that shit, man. They don't have privacy law like in Germany, right?
I mean, the question comes up: do we want to have this kind of situation, like in China, right? So we do need to find answers to these kind of things, but
Yes, you do, because that's how you have breakthroughs on your manufacturing line. And then you come out. I mean, how did the company do the Toyota manufacturing philosophy? Because they studied the factory in a new way, right? And they looked at how many steps people are taking to get a new tool to do a job on on a car that's going by. Every 70 seconds, another car is going by, right? So you got to save the worker time and make it right. And there's a whole bunch of innovation in there. In Germany, they're not allowed to study the worker, so they can't get the AI to tell them how to fix the factory floor.
yeah,
Relay it out.
innovation is harder in Germany. That is definitely the case, especially if you trained people over a very long period of time to be risk adverse, right? So to try
Yeah,
to look at the defaults and the possibilities, what can go all wrong. And I think if you have this kind of mindset and always saving costs because labor cost is so high already, right?
yeah.
I think innovation is very hard. This is yeah, very well known. But I hope you don't mind if we dive back a little bit more into the past of Robert, because
Oh,
this podcast is always about the people behind the technology.
yeah,
And if you are so kind to share a bit more about the
yeah.
I would like
I
to show,
I
what have you
had
been studying and working
yeah.
and yeah.
Well, I was a journalism student. I tried to go for computer science because my dad was an engineer.
Mm.
My dad got a PhD at Rutgers and moved us to Silicon Valley. That was my lucky stroke in life, right? And he worked for Lockheed Martin for 30 years, building military satellites, right? So I got to see the Silicon Valley grow from, a little tiny industry to a big, big, big industry, right? Billions and billions of dollars, right? It wasn't that way back in the early days. Um, and God, I had the only innovation blog really that covered startups in Silicon Valley for a long time. I I was before there was no TechCrunch, there was no Product Hunt, there was no Twitter, no Facebook, no YouTube, no LinkedIn, right? Back when I
So when did you
started back in
start
2000.
this blog?
2000. Yeah. And before that, I was working at a computer programming magazine, right? We called Visual Basic Programmers. Well, Fawcett Technical Publications, which made Java Pro, Visual Basic, and a .NET magazine. And I worked on the magazine, doing a variety of editing things and getting people to write articles for it. So I got to know all the programmers. Like Don Box was one of my main writers, right? He went on to run HoloLens at Microsoft. Right? So I knew him from 20 years ago when nobody knew who he was, right? He was just a programmer who was writing a book, yeah. And yeah. And so I just had a fortunate career because I was in the right place at the right time doing the right thing. And nobody knew about it. You know, right? So,
I mean, it keeps
it's
you
just
young, right? Being always surrounded by young, not necessarily only young people, right? Because I just read
yeah.
somewhere again the numbers show that the most successful entrepreneurs are around 40. But I mean,
Uh,
innovation and students
you
and
generally are better on your second or third company because you figure out how to hire people and how to not to fuck it all up. You know?
focusing on the right things, right?
You learn how people work and you learn how important culture is, right? And you understand and you learn how it works and how to deal with venture capitalists and how to deal with the press and how to deal with labor unions and whatever else you got to deal with, the government regulation. You do it a couple of times. The venture capitalists know the second time entrepreneurs make more money than first time because of that, right? Because they're just they know the game now, right? They've been through it. They have some scars.
And so at the moment, how would you describe your work at the moment? So where do you see when you said you were a blogger in the early 2000s, so
Yeah,
you're covering a lot of things at the moment. So where do you see yourself?
yeah.
Because when we started this conversation today, you said you're not a builder, you're not an engineer that builds anything, right? But maybe
Not,
you can
not
say a little
that.
bit about this.
I mean, I play around with. I'd certainly like a 3D printer, and I visited K-Scale, a little Y Combinator company in Palo Alto. They have a whole garage full of 3D printers building a little robot, right? And it's cool. And I like that. And I understand. I could go there and 3D print something, no problem. I just don't have anything really to 3D print, but you hang out with those people, like, oh, wait a second, you 3D printed a little short 4 foot high humanoid robot. I'm like, that's fucking badass. That's right? And cheaply, I like $8,000 to build a humanoid robot. It's like, oh,
Yeah, I think
I could put that on my credit card.
Yeah, I think I saw them first on a post of yours
Yeah,
out of this garage. I
yeah,
had Matt on one of my podcast episodes a while ago, and yeah, it's interesting how so many humanoid open source projects are popping up right in the last 4 months. And it's incredible what they do with a very small team of five people. So
yeah,
being there hands on and seeing them and seeing those things developing, and especially as you've been around long enough, you see people coming and going, right? So you do see,
yeah.
as you said, patterns. What is successful, or are you giving advices to these people? Are you
Uh,
the
I
startup advisor?
I mean, I don't do advising anymore. I'm not really that good at it because when an entrepreneur asks you to be an advisor, really they want two things: get me a customer and get me money. You know,
Mm,
right? And I'm not good at customer. That's a hard one because I don't have a lot of manufacturing customers reading me, right? So I have a few, but not that many. I'm not going to make your business work, right? And advising, I have connections with investors. I was just hanging out with some investors last night, right? But it's not what I like to do. And so I don't do it well. So I stopped doing it. It's just now if you show me something mind blowing, I'm showing it around. You know, I'm, I'll give
is
you
there something that
advice.
you see at the
I got
moment? Is
lots
there
of
some
advice. Some of it's correct.
Some of that is correct. Put that on the tagline of your services.
I have a lot of stupid advice that you listen to all of it, it'll destroy your company. But there's some gems in there. Some, Sometimes I say something smart.
and you still live in the area,
Yeah, I'm
in
in
the Bay Area.
San Jose, California, Silicon Valley. Yeah, old school Silicon
So
Valley.
you've seen the area because a friend of mine just moved there, and
Yeah,
from a company, we do have an office over there as well. And
yeah,
So she moved to a few places within San Francisco to really to get a feeling of the city. And
Yeah.
if you're telling me that yeah your father moved there back in the 70s or maybe even earlier, and
No, 71.
how okay, so how was it for you to growing up and see this entire, like you said, coming from a very
I,
small place to this huge
I was in
um,
I was in the
ecosystem?
first computer club at High Junior High in Cupertino, right, which is close to Apple Computer. And I got a tour of Apple when it was a small building, in Cupertino. Now it's like a whole bunch of crazy buildings all over the place, right? Um, yeah. Uh, it, Back then in the 70s, there was still a lot of orchards, so it wasn't as big a deal as it is today. It was a big deal because a lot of the companies here were hiring nerds like my dad from around the United States or the world, right, to move them to Silicon Valley to be an R&D engineer. Why did the car industry move all their R&D labs here? Because the talent got moved here by the
Mm.
industry, right? It continues to this day. My street has people from all over the world on it because Apple hires somebody from France and Cisco hires somebody from Japan, and right. And so you get a very international neighborhood now here in Silicon Valley, which was not true when I was a kid. And when I was a kid, it was, not diverse that way, right? It was all, rich white kids, basically.
And if you see the city today, I mean, we can see, yeah, I mean, here I'm sitting in Germany, but seeing the city having this boom and having so many people getting paid so well because you have the tech companies that make so much money, right? And
Yeah,
drawing all those talents towards San Francisco. So, but the city also has this downside, has its downsides, right? And
yeah,
I think maybe Corona was an accelerator for that.
yeah.
Now everyone is staying at home because working remote is much more convenient than traveling and commuting all the time. So, well, how do you
Although
see
the
the city?
traffic is back, so the companies are forcing the workers to come back to work. My
So,
my
what's your
wife
thought on
works at
that?
Broadcom, and they say you got to be in the office 5 days a week. Even though you could do the job at home, we don't care. We want you to come to the office because there's other advantages of you being in the office, right?
So, how do you see the situation? What's your opinion on that?
On the work from home
Yeah,
thing.
I mean the entire topic in general.
Yeah, um, there's some advantage to having people in an office. You get more serendipity, you get more mixing, you get more trust, you get more quick decisions being made because you can jump in a meeting and do a whiteboard session with somebody right next to you and be more efficient about it, right? And they look at that. And on the other hand, if you're a technologist, if you're a programmer, you can program anywhere in the world, right? As long as you have a connection to the internet, you can check in code, right? So I know many companies that have a workforce all over the world because of that, right? Automatic started here in San Francisco. They never really had a headquarters because they always hired people working out of their homes. And they're mostly hiring programmers, so that works, right? And they found a way to manage people who don't work in one office together, and that works. But in the auto industry, you got to make a product in a factory. You got to have some workers doing that, right? So they got to come to work, and it, there are some advantages to coming into the office and meeting with the people like that, right? And hanging out and being at lunch with them, right?
I mean, hardware and manufacturing becomes sexy now at the moment. In the moment that we build embodied AI, right? So
Yeah.
this humanoid hype. I think just a few days ago there was a
I
new
get where you're
episode with
going.
where and it was a new episode with Brad Addock from Figure, right? He's one of
Uh,
the key figures, key people in that space, and you see that manufacturing now becomes interesting again because now you do
yeah.
need to build stuff, right? And it's expensive and it's hard, and
Ah,
you cannot do as many fast iterations as you can do with code, right? Because when a machine crashes. It could be like 500K are gone because not entirely gone, but there's some repairment needs to be done that is much more
ah.
expensive than just running the code again. So do you see
Yeah,
do you see
You're just right. At the 1x.tech humanoid robot company, they let me embody myself. I was wearing a VR headset and I could put myself into the robot and walk the robot around and do things and high five people and stuff like that, right? And so now, yeah, a manufacturing person could be working at home, right? Could be sitting in their house in their office with a VR headset on and some sensors on their hands, and they're controlling a robot on the manufacturing line, walking around and high-fiving their coworker and saying hi. Right? I mean, at Broadcom, they already have little rolling robots. You can roll one of those into a meeting, right, and be embodied in the video conference robot. That's the first step to that, right? So you're right. The world is changing. Why not make a manufacturing line where the workers can work at home, right?
I mean, you see those videos being online and going viral, where, for example, we see these big trucks in Australia for all the
Yeah.
mining, and people sitting at home with, I don't know, 10 different displays and a joystick, and controlling them via satellite and from
Yeah.
home, right? And getting paid shitload of money.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, this is one of the few steps. I mean, I think the end goal would be getting rid of the worker in the first place. So no remote working, and there's some
Well,
restaurants that work this way, right?
you know that embodying yourself in a robot, it lets you gather the data of what the person's doing in the robot to teach the robot a new job, right? So maybe I'm jumping into the robot and teaching it how to run a piece of manufacturing equipment. Here's what you have to worry about and what you have to look at and what you have to do, right? And teach a robot. Uh, the robot has the camera. Remember the German VW line who said no cameras on the manufacturing line? Well, what a humanoid robot walking around the manufacturing line has cameras. So this is a new problem for Germany, right? Do they allow humanoid robots on the manufacturing line because they have cameras to look at everybody and watch everybody working?
This might be one of the reasons why those POCs or first tests are happening in the US, right? So with Figure, Mercedes, or BMW, no, BMW and Figure and Mercedes and Apptronic,
Yeah.
could
Well,
be one of the
that and
reasons,
the
right?
AI people are here in San Francisco, right? Why did the auto industry move their R&D labs here? Because the people who build the robots and build the models and build the AI that's inside the robot are largely here. I mean, there's a few in France and a few in China has a big community, but in terms of the Western world, there's way more in San. You go to San Francisco meetup, it's you can't do that anywhere else. There is no
Hmm,
AI meetup in Kansas City, right? And if there is one, there's one a month. We have one, we have three a night.
crazy.
Yeah, it's a completely different world here, right? And you go to San Francisco. I was in San Francisco last night. There's autonomous cars everywhere, right? So there's Zoox and Waymo and Tesla and Cruise and a whole bunch. There was a couple that didn't even have names on them. I didn't even know who they were. So there's another company that I have to figure out who got some funding to build some weird shit in San Francisco.
So you still see this area as the most vibrant area to be
Yeah.
in
For
if it's
AI.
about technology. Okay.
For AI, for autonomy, for autonomous car driving, for even manufacturing equipment. A lot of it's the R&D is done here. Even retail, Sephora has an R&D facility. They have a whole store that's in a warehouse, right, just to test out retail innovations and run
But it's
people
hard
through there. And right,
but it's hard to mimicking the I mean there's so many things you can do in simulation, right? And now
yeah,
if the car manufacturer that are still exist somehow in the US and are in the Rust Belt or Detroit area,
they're in
you said
trouble.
but the question is, so if there are in R&D labs are now in the valley as well, but
Yeah.
you, as I said, I remember I had a few projects, for example, with automotive and AI companies. They were doing visual AI visual inspection. So
Yeah.
the things that getting produced, the majority of people would not believe that, but there's still lines where people sitting there 8 hours a day, like three shifts, and looking at the defects on parts, right?
Yeah.
A human eye is doing that. And
Yeah.
then some AI startups are coming
Even
into the
in China,
scene.
they still have humans involved in Q&A, partly because the machine will kick out an error and say, "Oh, this hard drive's bad," right? And then you got to take that hard drive over to a scanning electron microscope and go dive in on the chip inside and figure out what's going on, right? So you have to have a highly skilled human workforce who knows how to run an electron microscope. That's not how many kids in America know how to run a scanning electron microscope? Not many, I can tell you.
No, no, I was talking more about the manufacturing side itself. So you can do so
Yeah,
much
this was
AI
on the
and
manufacturing line. There was a scanning electron microscope right in the middle of the manufacturing line to for the human to figure out what's going wrong with a part, right?
no, my question was going towards, do you think that it could be like a revival of the manufacturing side because there's so many expertise that
Yeah,
software just doesn't have and they need, and it's very hard to simulate or do come up with synthetic data, and you can do
yeah.
only so much simulation or collecting of data, and maybe for let's say a shorter period of time, a revival of those car companies that have these kind of lines and bring some of the
The problem
yeah
is the game has changed.
yeah
The game has changed for how you make vehicles. The Chinese, the top of the line, the Xiaomi that just brought out a car and has a fully automated factory. They're making cars like Tesla does with a casting machine. They're not making it on a rail like Ford or Mercedes-Benz does, right? It's a new way to make cars, and uh, it's hard to change from the old way to the new way. But if you're starting a new company, doing it the new way makes a lot of sense, and it's safer, it's quieter, right? And it's more comfortable, it's lighter, so your car goes further on a battery charge, right? There's a lot of advantages to doing it the new way.
but I
And
remember that Elon was saying that it's very hard
but
for
how do you
any
get rid of the German workforce and say, hey, we're going to do an automated factory? How are you going to have robots walking around a German factory? Well, Brad Atkins robots are rolling around BMW. I'm sure they had to have a lot of discussion about what's allowed, where is the robot allowed to go in the factory floor? Because they have rules against taking pictures of the factory worker in Germany, right? So you have a computer with cameras on it, that solves that problem. Just put a lot of cameras in the factory floor and we can study the factory floor again, like I wanted
true
to
true.
8 years ago, when this.
So this was the time that where you were visiting Mercedes.
Yeah, I studied automotive innovation for a long time, right? That's why I had the first ride in the first Mercedes-Benz autonomous car
And where was
because I had
that?
uh, I I have to look. It was a while ago, 10 years ago.
No, I mean where did you study?
It's Sunnyvale at their R&D facility, right?
Mm.
And they gave me a car to drive down to CES, and they drove me down in Las Vegas again. So yeah, but anyways, it's like we're heading into a new manufacturing world where you're making things different with different kinds of machines and different kinds of processes and different kinds of lines than you used to have. Go to Detroit. The people in Detroit, they have no fucking idea what's coming. They're not in San Francisco. They don't see the autonomous cars literally in the streets. It's a war right now in San Francisco over the autonomous cars. You don't see that in Detroit. So
You don't see it anywhere.
The Detroit worker has no fucking idea how good this shit is, right? And what the world is about to do. And so they're not making the right investments in Detroit, and their product is not selling in China. They just laid off 1,000 workers, software people, because their product's not selling in China, which is the only fucking market that really matters. It's so huge of a market, right? It saved General Motors from many times the Chinese market because they bought billions of dollars worth of GM cars. They like American brands in China, right? But they can't buy a Buick anymore because the Buick is not as cool as the Neo
Mm.
or the Tesla.
Yeah, there will be a big change coming towards us,
Right?
like
A lot of
especially.
layoffs are coming. The auto industry, let's be honest with them. You're fucked. You're in trouble. If you don't change really radically, you're going to go out of business. You're not going to have an industry in Germany or Detroit. It's that dire. And people in Detroit don't get that.
I mean, I think that
Some of them do. Henry Ford just hired a friend of mine to right. Ford just hired a friend of mine to try to fix this problem, right, and get Detroit on the path to getting competitive again. And it's a really
but
tough
it's
problem.
as you said before. I mean, it's very hard to change, especially if change could mean that you getting rid of your own job, right? So I think it's
Yeah,
very
because
hard to do this kind of
you're a
things.
guy who learned how to make a car when there was a carburetor. You don't know fucking shit about AI. You didn't grow up thinking about AI math and compilers and software and right. You didn't go to school for computer science, but you're trying to judge an R&D group in Silicon Valley and you have no fucking idea what to do with them. This is the problem. This was the Xerox PARC problem. Remember, Xerox PARC had a little R&D lab that owned the whole fucking industry in one building here in Silicon Valley. And Xerox funded it. They knew they needed to fund it, but they didn't know once the work got done, they didn't know what to do with it. And they were scared of it because they thought it would destroy their copier business. So they didn't want to go forward and they didn't want to commercialize it. And so Steve Jobs got it and built the Macintosh out of it,
Mm.
right? And the same thing is going down here. You got your Detroit auto executives who have no fucking idea about autonomous cars. None. They don't know. They don't know how to run these groups. They don't know how to manage software engineers. They don't know how to do it. And they make bad choices. And it's going to cost them.
I mean, it's hard to listening to people, especially if you have been in charge for a very long period of time, right? To have this kind of mindset where you think everything that I have been taught now is worthless, basically,
Bingo.
because and that means I am
And it's not just
worthless.
auto industry, right? I
Yeah,
uh,
but
I give a talk to a bunch of Irish entrepreneurs.
is still very big, right? So in
Yeah.
Germany, we have one of the few biggest car companies in the world are in Germany with the longest histories and the biggest brands, so to speak.
Yeah.
And I think the big part of it is also the first and second and third supplier for the
Yeah.
car industry. I think this is huge, and patents, the majority of patents are still in that area. And now you're saying actually I don't need 12 people for building a car. I need just like three, right? So, and
Or
I don't
less.
need all those things in an EV car, even though the hate is big. For sure, the hate is big because a German car you love, there's so much emotion with it and the sound with it, but there's also a lot of dirtiness with it, right? And a lot of things that can
Sound is
break
a good
and
one,
yeah.
right? That's old thinking. Oh, I got to have a muscle car with a noisy engine. You know, a Ferrari. Ferrari has nice sound, right? Or a BMW, like an M3, has nice sound on a racetrack. Great. But you do a Zoom call in the fucking car because it's making too much racket. People don't understand human beings change.
Hmm.
They change what they believe because they're doing something new in the car that they weren't doing 30 years ago. They're all looking at their fucking phone while they're driving the car.
Yeah,
I'm
this is
watching them
crazy.
because I have an autonomous car and they're driving right next to me on their fucking phone.
Yeah, yeah.
And then, and that the whole industry is people who used to build carburetors back in the 70s and have muscle
Hmm.
car, right? That was hot in the 70s. Now it's not hot no more. And people say, "Oh, I like to have a sound in my car." You're a fucking idiot.
Yeah, but I
An
mean, you do
electric
need to
car is
admit.
way fucking better.
I mean, you do need to admit that um,
I'm getting
I feel.
animated because I hear this shit from the employees and from people in the auto industry over and over, and they're wrong. And I
But
here's another example of how times change and people can't get that there's new thing for a consumer. I was giving a speech to a bunch of Irish entrepreneurs who were in Silicon Valley on a field trip. The whole purpose of the field trip is to figure out how to start a Google in Ireland instead of Silicon Valley, right? So they were trying to figure out how do you get innovation startups, to start in Ireland so that you can have a future for your economy in Ireland, right? And I
Mhm.
stood up, I was the keynote speaker, and it was the day Mark Zuckerberg bought Instagram. And so I said, Mark Zuckerberg just bought Instagram for $1 billion. This is a company that has no sales, no profits, no revenues, no profits, no nothing, no sales. It had no fucking sales. Think about that. It was worth $1 billion. It had not a dollar of revenue, right? They couldn't handle that. They did not understand that. And they couldn't understand it because of their past. Because
Mm.
these were people who ran factories and had retail stores and had big businesses. One guy owned all the McDonald's in Ireland, right? He had employees, he had assets, he had, something to point to of how valuable his company was. And Instagram was coming along and had 14 employees, had no employees, had no assets, had no sales, no revenues, and was worth $1 billion. And I stood up and said, "This is a cheap purchase. This company is going to be worth $100 billion." Not a not a single person agreed with me. Not a single one did.
But I mean,
They
it is
don't
hard.
have the information about what modern business, innovative business does. I hear this over and over again that people are experts, and they're wrong. They're wrong over and over and over again.
But Robert, you are surrounding yourself with these kind of technology. You surrounding yourself with these kind of people and listening to their thoughts and see what they have, what they imagine, what they inspire to build. And then you have the
Yeah.
majority of people. If you look at the demographic pyramid or the numbers, you see that the major over 50% of German population is over 50, right? So
Yeah.
and
And they
so
read
and these.
newspapers in the planes. I was in Germany, everybody was reading a newspaper. We don't read fucking paper in America, in Silicon Valley. That shit's old.
Yeah, but these are the decision
But
makers
this is
still,
the
right?
problem in the culture in Germany. They're not using computers for everything. They're using paper still.
Yeah, true. But I mean, this is the reason why it's so hard to make innovation because these people are still the decision maker, right? And if you don't
Yes.
understand the future, then you're very hard to adapt to the future, and then you're very
Bingo.
hard, it's very hard for you to predict even the future or work with the future, right?
It can be
Because you're
right in
not
front of
used to
you,
it.
like this Instagram meeting I had. It was literally in front of them, and they were arguing with me about it,
Hmm.
how bad it's. How is this company worth $1 billion? They asked me over and over. It's like this company's not worth anything. It has no employees, it has no factory, it has no sales, it has no profits. How is this worth $1 billion? That's what they argued with me about.
I mean, in the very end, they're asking themselves, what kind of value does this provide to the people, right? And so you cannot touch it, you cannot own it. So where's the value, right? And the value is a bit
See,
of
why did
imaginary,
I
right?
know? The question is, why did I know the future and they didn't? Because
Because
I
you're
spoke at
surrounded with the
I
people
spoke
that
at
are.
Google's first advertising conference.
Hmm.
I was the only Microsoft employee to get invited to speak at Google's first advertising conference. Think about
Well,
that
there you
one. That's
go. There
crazy.
you go.
They sat me with the craft food executives, which is one of the top advertisers on Google. And I was
Hmm.
like, how do you know this all works? Why are you spending so much money with this little startup? Back then, Google was still a little startup. It was the first one, right? First advertising conference had a few hundred people at it. Why are you spending so much money with this little company that no, very few people in the world know? Now everybody knows what Google is, but back then it was a new company.
Hmm.
Oh, because we know it works. How do you know it works? Because we know where sales come from. We track every freaking thing about our
Hmm.
sales, right? So if we do some advertising and the sales go up 10%, we know the advertising worked, right? And we know it works. We track everything about our
Hmm.
customer. They told me they spend $34 to get a 16-year-old to try their cheese. The Super Bowl ads, they cost millions of dollars, right? They do Super Bowl ad. They do other ads. They do other marketing. They do trials. They buy end caps. They do all sorts of marketing thing to get the customer to know them, right? $34. So when Instagram had 100 million people and it was doubling every few months, right? And going up like an exponent, I was like, this company's going to be able to sell all that to for $34 per person. They have 100 million people. That's good. And it's growing. So I know tomorrow they're going to have 200 million people and then 400 million people and then 800 million. Today it has 3 billion people, right? On Instagram.
So if you're looking into the hype that is happening at the moment around AI and robotics, and even though you're not a roboticist yourself and not working
No, but
for a
I
robotic
visit
company,
I visit every robot company I can because I like robots, you know. Who doesn't?
whenever you're in Germany, have a look at us. So we are the
I would love
except
to. There's
from.
some really great technologists. I mean, you know, this isn't my reflect hat, but usually I have a hat on from a company
I
in
mean, I
Germany
mean,
that
One X
augmented
is
reality.
doing humanoids in Europe and Norway, but other than that, it's just it's neuro robotics here in Germany, right? And we
Yeah,
are surrounded, and we are talking with the big automotive in Germany about the next
yeah.
steps and what we could do together. So if you see, I mean, you're always very close to the pulse of to the zeitgeist. Um, is there what do you see? I mean, there will be because the people asking it would be 675 million enough for building a humanoid robot for figure AI.
Yeah.
Do you see, and you see popping up every single day Chinese company that is building humanoids as well, right? So where do you see yourself? The fight is happening, and where do you see us in a few years? If you would be able to
Um,
use this as a closing word here.
the 1X technology, the AI team at the 1X humanoid robot company told me it's coming a lot faster than most people recognize. In the next 18 months, they're going to release their first humanoid robot for consumer use in a home, right? They're not thinking the modern robotics people are not just thinking about manufacturing anymore because the cost is coming down to the consumer level. You can 3D print a little 4 foot high robot for $8,000. There's a lot of consumers who can afford that. There's many who can't, but a lot of people can put $8,000 on a credit card if they wanted to, right?
Hmm.
And pay it off. It's not that big a deal. You know, I have many people who bought $10,000 things in their lives around me, right? You know? So, right? So you have a company like Tesla is not playing just for if you think they're just going after the manufacturing line to make their factories more efficient, that's not what they're doing. They're playing to get it in your house, right?
Yeah, obviously, this
And
is the biggest market, as you said, right?
or my brother owns a bar. He wants three of them. He's willing to pay $100,000 each for them. Well,
Never gets ill, never steals money, never gets drunken, never
no,
comes late. So,
never complains that he has to lift a keg and put a keg up in a machine to serve beer. Right? Never
yeah.
complains.
Hmm. I'm as I'm in this industry myself, and we have a humanoid in our portfolio, and I see the development that is happening at the moment. I'm very curious to see. You said 18 months. I'm very curious to see what comes out of it, and if Europe will be still playing a role, right? Because it was playing a role when it comes to automotive for a very long period of time and leading that,
Yeah.
and yeah,
And
starting
that's the
it.
problem. They don't, German car manufacturer doesn't have a robo taxi. They don't have
Yeah,
autonomous
yeah,
car.
it's crazy.
Right. And
I'm
so you start thinking about like 10 years from now, many people are not owning a car.
Yeah,
They're,
I have the
or
same
they
feeling.
might have a car in their driveway, but they'll take the Tesla or a Waymo or a Zoox around, right? I
Mm-hmm.
already meet people like this in San Francisco. They tell me they don't drive anymore. They
Mm-hmm.
don't care about owning a car anymore because they're living in
Mm-hmm.
a city that has an autonomous car network,
Mm-hmm. You're
right?
absolutely right. I'm I'm
And
I-
this is
I'm with
coming
you.
to the world. If you think Waymo is stopping at San Francisco, you're just not rational. They're going
Mm-hmm.
after the world. In three, Uber was invented right in front of me in a German snowstorm, and it took 3 years to become an international company. With I interviewed housewives in the slums in South Africa about how they used Uber car, like
Crazy.
just a few years after it was invented.
This is crazy. This is
Right. And
this
so
is
that's my
adoption, right? So this
expectation
is
is a
adoption.
humanoid robot comes out from a company like Tesla or something, and there's millions of them real quick
Hmm.
because they're not that hard to manufacture at scale. It's just electric motors. Come on, we know how to make electric
Let's see
motors.
if this is true. I have a bet going on about this. How fast they really because they do need to be very accurate. Then they do need to be very reliable around human beings. The
Yeah.
battery, so
Yeah.
fingers are still very hard to control.
Yeah.
Walking is still very hard to control.
Yeah.
So, but you're right. I mean, we will see the
18
development in a
months
few
solves a
years.
lot of those problems. They're solving them in the R&D labs at a fairly
So
high
then
rate. I mean,
let's have the next
I walked
episode in
around
18
inside
months.
I embodied myself in a humanoid robot and walked around and it works, right? So
So let's agree that we will see each other in 18 months. This I
yeah.
hope that I will be able to survive this
Now,
podcast for
18
this
months
period
is
of
when
time.
you and might have one, right? Because we're reviewers, we're in the business, we're early adopters. The everyday average consumer, I think the data is the 2030s, right? I
Mm,
think it takes a few years, but it's not long. I mean, we're
mm.
in 2024, almost
Yeah.
2025 right now, so that's
Let's
5 years
see
away.
if this decade will become the humanoid decade where it will be a big rollout, as you said, in everyone's home. Maybe early adopters. Let's see, manufacturing
Yeah.
first, most likely. But yeah, there is a big
Yeah,
need,
because they can
especially.
pay for it, right?
Yeah, true.
If you're paying a worker $100,000 a year to work on your manufacturing line, you're very willing to spend 100,000 on a robot to replace
Yeah,
that worker or
obviously,
help that
obviously.
worker, right? Make that worker
Uh,
more productive.
and yeah, getting rid of all the unproductive days, like you said, the Fridays, right? I was
Yeah.
very happy. I was very happy that you said yes. I think I would love to talk longer with you. The last time I had a very long episode. I would like to invite you a second time in the future and see if
Yeah.
one of your predictions comes true. You're very close to what's happening at the moment, and yeah, I was
Each of my 7 books predicted decade-long trends. I'm pretty good at predicting what's coming. So, I mean, I'm not perfect for certainly around dates, right? Because maybe I'm wrong. Maybe it's not 18 months, it's 36 months. Okay,
yeah,
right?
let's
It could
see.
slip 36 months, but it's coming pretty quick in terms of our human history, right? And that's not very long.
Yeah, it's crazy
So,
what's happening in the
yeah.
times we are in.
And Tesla has an autonomous car to bring the robot to your house. This is why the robotaxi matters. Why, if you don't have a robotaxi, you're done. You're
Mm.
done.
I will pitch this idea again to the German car industry. Let's see what happens.
No, they're not going to get it because even if they get it, even if you talk, Eastman Kodak invented the electric camera, the digital camera, right? But they
Mm.
couldn't do Instagram because they were run by chemical engineers. They had the same problem. They were run by people who built
In
a
the
past
past, it was stuck
technology.
in the past. Yeah, true.
Yeah, they look at the world through chemistry, right? And Eastman Kodak, that's what it was film and
Mm.
paper and stuff like that. Photography supplies.
Gone.
When digital comes along, all that's gone. Right? I don't
Mm.
use film anymore. You don't use
Mm.
film anymore. So,
Never used film in the first place.
oh well, I used a lot of film. I sold millions of dollars to Eastman Kodak in my camera store, right? So
Yeah.
yeah, it's gone now, right?
Mm.
Back in the 80s, that was the hot company. That was the big company. It was really
Crazy.
important company, right? Now it's gone. So it can happen and it will happen in this paradigm shift. There are major paradigm shift coming in a bunch of different directions, and it's going to kill the car industry if they don't change and change hard.
I doubt this will happen in Germany. Let's see
Yeah.
if we can do
No, because
something.
they're reading newspapers and they're flying.
Stop it.
They,
Stop it. I'm
to
ashamed,
get
but
into
yes,
the
it's
new
true.
world, you have to force yourself to use AI for
Yes,
every
true.
fucking thing. You
True.
cannot read your newspaper anymore. You
True.
got to put that shit down and stop
Mm.
doing it and
Mm.
change. You got to come
Robert,
to San
whenever you are
Francisco and see how we read the news. We don't read newspapers.
Robert, when you're on
In our
in
autonomous
Germany,
car, we're reading our phone like everybody
that is
should,
true.
right?
That is true. People should actually think about it. You can easier read on your phone if you don't need to look out of the window, right? Robert, when you're in Germany, please be so kind. Or when you're in Europe,
I love it. I'm half
have a
German,
meet.
so I love coming to Germany. Take me out on the Autobahn in one of the German cars. I like
Okay.
it. That's the one thing is still got. The Porsche still is pretty nice on the Autobahn, you
It's
know?
fighting. It's we are the only one in all of Europe that still has these kind of opportunities. Let's see if we can
Yeah.
stick to that or not. Like I said,
Yeah.
I'm very happy that you took the time for my a little podcast, and I would be happy to have this go the next episode with you in 18 months or sooner or later. And yeah, thanks for the support for
Sorry
all
for
the
swearing
smaller
so much.
ones.
I get animated about
No,
this
I love
issue
it. I love
because
it. I love it. I love the energy.
I drove my Tesla to Detroit to study the Detroit industry and give an executive at Ford a ride in my Tesla and talk about this stuff, right? There are people in the auto industry who do get innovation. It's just they are surrounded by a system that was built to support the old world and not the new world. They're
True.
not, they don't have robo taxi in their street that
True.
we
And they
do.
will, yeah.
They
Maybe
do.
we should get more executives going to San Francisco and sitting in those kind of cars to really see what this can do to you
Yeah.
and how this is, right? Because driving around a car is nice,
Yeah.
obviously, but speaking to your friends and watching on your mobile phone things can be even nicer. Let's see if
Yeah.
we will be able to survive,
Certainly
as I
in San
said.
Francisco, you can't drive fast in San Francisco. It's a city. It's full of traffic and
Yeah,
people.
true,
You,
true.
I just drove through the whole thing and I drove 35 miles an hour through the whole city, right? It's
I feel the
slow,
same way. I feel the same way.
right? And so it's the real problem for them isn't recognizing that change is coming because anybody who's smart recognizes that you could come to San Francisco. I'll show you the change is coming,
It's not
right?
about recognizing. I think it's about admitting that you could become obsolete. And I think admitting this and seeing yourself maybe not having this kind of position
The
or
problem,
importance anymore in the future
yeah,
is very hard to swallow for the ego. And you need to see the bigger picture, not
particularly
yourself.
when you're a billionaire, right, or a
Mm.
millionaire, when you're an executive making a big salary,
I think
you
it's a
don't want
middle
to give that
management
up.
to I think to be honest, because the bigger ones are able to do this kind of innovation and have the risk because they fall easier and they fall softer, right? So I think it's
Yeah,
about the middle management and the worker itself that will be we're having a hard time in the future.
yeah.
Um,
There's still work to be done. I mean, but the problem is that the Chinese market is speaking loudly that the rest of the industry is not doing the job. They're not buying the product.
mm, mm,
And you see it. German car industry is not doing good in China. The American auto
mhm.
industry, other than Tesla, which is not Detroit auto industry, is West Coast, is doing well, but nobody else is. And so if you don't understand China is all that matters in the auto industry, then you shouldn't be an executive, right?
I will take your quote and let's the next conversation I will have I will see if I can address that and what we can get out of it. I do need to say I was very surprised that you took the time, and
Yeah.
I really like that you're supporting smaller, not only me, but smaller accounts and smaller startups in general on social media and in the real world. So
It's
I'm
where the
very
future
happy.
comes from. Two guys in a garage,
Yeah,
it's like
true, true.
not important today, important tomorrow.
This is the motto. This is the motto. Take care, and
Love.
if I will ever be have the opportunity to be in San Francisco, I will give you a call.
Absolutely. I'll take you
Take
for a
care.
ride. Thanks.
Bye bye.